The real interesting slide is Bob's project. We love this slide. The outcomes on this build are incredible. Because Bob called it a net zero house earlier on, it's not a net zero house. He did it considerably better than net zero. In fact, the rest of the houses that he wasn't trying to achieve net zero on came very close to being net zero naturally, because he's an intelligent designer who was making brilliant decisions before we ever came along and gave him any advice. He, with his net zero house, went 9,000 kgs below the actual net zero. Now that means, or the equivalent, just to put it in context, 9,000 kgs below net zero is 4 trips around the world in a Toyota Hilux. It's the equivalent of planting 65 native trees, which will tell you how powerful our trees actually are. And it's the equivalent of growing and producing 16,000 steaks or eating 50,000 flat whites. That's how much was saved in just one of these houses, right? 9,000 kgs. It's also 28,000 kg less than your average house that's built here in New Zealand. So it's absolutely, it's transformative. And the decisions that Bob made, very, very simple changes. At a domestic level, it's actually very easy to decarbonize our buildings because a lot of them are made with wood anyway. But what Bob made that was key and fundamental to be negative carbon or climate positive was that he changed out his concrete foundations to raised suspended timber floor, which is a material that's storing carbon. It's storing more carbon that's emitting into the atmosphere. The rest of the houses are low carbon concrete, which are reducing the carbon emissions, but not actually gone carbon negative. The major difference between these two houses, as I said, was the concrete. So if you can swap across to a raised timber floor from actual concrete, you're coming really, really, really close to being carbon negative. Some of the other changes, so as I said, low carbon concrete was used in the rest of the super homes. Instead of structural steel beams, he used glulam beams and timber beams. And the cladding systems, instead of using metal claddings or fiber cement claddings, used a combination of acetyl treated cladding systems and heat treated cladding systems. And then the last thing was the UPVC joinery in the houses as well actually has a fairly big impact. Aluminium often in New Zealand doesn't come from green sources. It's virgin aluminium and therefore emits more carbon in the production of them. When you bring in green aluminium, it comes a little bit closer, but the UPVC is still a far better performer. Those are the fundamental changes. I know that Bob has made a lot more little incremental changes, but those were probably the 6 biggest impact changes that you can have in your house. If you went with the suspended timber floor and probably the cladding systems or the UPVC windows, you'd have a carbon negative home. It's that easy.